He killed her in a bar fight. That sentence is simple and raw because it happened under neon lights, with beer sloshing and bodies pressed close, a cheap jukebox drowning the shouts. I am a cop. She was my daughter. The night started like any late Friday. Loud music, spilled drinks, someone laughing too hard, and it ended with one hard punch that broke a life and our whole world. They called it a fight. They called it tragic. People wanted to move on. I could not. I trusted the law to do its work, but when the official answers arrived slow and polite, something in me hardened into a different plan. This is not a courtroom story. It is a colder thing, a set of deliberate moves, a private pressure I put on a man who thought he could walk back into normal. I will show you how ordinary pieces, a glass, a frame of video, one offhand text, can be arranged into a mirror that forces a liar to look. Stay with me to the last line. If this grips you, hit like and subscribe so this story finds you and those who need to hear it today. My name is Daniel. I wore a badge for nearly 2 decades because I believed in a simple promise. Get up, go out, keep people safe, come home when you can. I worked nights and holidays. I missed birthdays on patrol and made up for it with rituals. Small, stubborn things that meant the world to someone who worked with sirens and paperwork. My daughter's name was Emily. She was 22, sharp and stubborn, in the way that made you laugh and wince at once. She loved old vinyl records and neon signs, the things with a little wear that still shone. She'd pluck a song on a thrift store stereo and ask me to dance in the kitchen like we were trying on a better life for a minute. She collected ordinary relics, a chipped coffee mug with a cartoon cat, a paper crown from some party she'd refused to throw away, a faded concert wristband she kept folded in her wallet. She had a phrase she used when she was nervous. One more minute. And it became a private joke between us. She'd say it before stepping on stage for an improv show, or before trying a dish she'd never cooked. It was small. I write it down now because small things matter later. We built routines to handle the strange hours my job demanded. On nights I was gone, Emily would leave a note on the microwave, left a snack, be safe. I would call between calls. She'd pick up, breathless, laughing about an awkward date or a late shift at the coffee shop. When I got home, she'd be awake, waiting like it was a secret we shared. Those late-night routines made the world feel whole. They were simple, but they were ours. Being a cop taught me to look for patterns and to keep a steady face when everything is uneven. Being her father taught me to sit with silence until she filled it again. We fought sometimes about curfews, about the music too loud, about me not being there. But our arguments smoothed out the next morning with burnt toast and a shrug. We trusted one another in small ways that felt like armor. There were little odd things too. Small, nearly invisible edges I would tuck away. Emily liked to keep a tiny flashlight in her purse. She hated being caught without light. She once told me she felt safer with it because, even in the dark, you could make out the shapes that mattered. She always wore the same silver locket, scratched on one side from years of being bumped against her keys. She kept tickets, movie stubs, a bar wristband, from nights she said she'd probably forget. When I think back, the locket and the wristband sit in my memory like markers on a map I did not know I'd need. Work made me practical about risk, but I still believed in the system. I believed witnesses, reports, and procedure could hold a story together. I also trusted people, neighbors, bartenders, kids from the improv troupe who liked to hang around on the weekends. We all inhabited a neighborhood that felt small enough to keep an eye on, big enough for life to keep happening. Those small rituals, the flashlight, the locket, the phrase, "one more minute," they were ordinary. They were the scaffolding of our days. They are the things that now feel like pieces of a life someone tried to take whole. When Emily left for that bar that night, she left with the same silver locket at her throat and a folded wristband in her pocket. Tiny objects I would later find myself tracing like clues. Those keepsakes, once charming and trivial, would become the small anchors for the rest of my decisions. The bar smelled like spilled beer and fried food, a warm sourness that clung to the air the way old arguments cling to a family. A jukebox thumped a familiar rock song so loud you could feel it in your teeth. Neon signs painted faces in blue and red. People leaned on the bar, elbows sticky, laughing too loud, or not laughing at all. Emily loved that chaos. the messy, bright kind of night that made everything feel more possible. She'd gone with friends to unwind after an improv show, said she'd be home late. I trusted her to be careful. I never imagined the night would turn on a single hard punch. When the fight started, it felt small at first. A pushed shoulder, a harsh word, a glass clinking too close to someone's jaw. Bars have that way of condensing heat. A spark can become flame in a heartbeat. I later learned Emily wasn't looking for trouble. She'd gone to calm a situation, something she always did, annoying and brave in equal measure. Witnesses later said she'd stepped between two men, hands up like she was telling them to stop. That's everything I need to know about her. Then one moment, one single motion, changed everything. A man in a dark jacket swung. It was not a shove or a shove that became a fall. It was a blow that landed on bone and breath. She went down like someone turned off a lamp. For a second, the music kept playing. The jukebox didn't know the world had shifted. Then there was blood, a scream that split the noise, a chair toppling. Glass shattered like small exclamation points. People surged away and toward her at the same time. Some to help, some to check if they were seen. The first call to me was trembling and short. "Daniel, get here. Emily's been hit." My hands were already on the wheel before I hung up. I remember the drive like a run of film strips, red brake lights, the scant glow of street lamps, the alley where a man ducked into shadow. When I arrived, the patrol cars had not yet filled the curb. A bouncer, the kind I'd waved to 100 times, said he'd seen it and then grew thin-lipped when I asked what he'd seen. An acquaintance I'd trusted, one of Emily's friends, shuffled off into a back room and didn't come back. Someone said they had footage on a phone. Then the phone went quiet. The scene was immediate chaos. EMTs lining up questions, a bar owner pressing a hand to his mouth, a crowd compressing into whispered speculation. But amid the confusion, there were pieces that didn't fit the tidy story they tried to hand me. An angle of fall that didn't match a stumble. Fragments of a glass not where a random fall would leave them. And someone's slipper print on the bar mat that suggested a presence where no one accounted for. Those small inconsistencies lodged under my skin like splinters. I carried them away with me that night, and I would not let them heal on their own. They worked the scene with the same calm I'd taught cadets. Methodical, boxed off, efficient. Tape went up in a rectangle around the spot where Emily fell. Officers moved like clockwork, photos, measurements, evidence bags, while EMTs called times, and a sergeant took notes with a mouth that tried not to tremble. I watched them do their jobs and felt a split inside me. Grateful for their steadiness, and furious that procedure felt slow as grief. The official line arrived fast and polite. Tragic bar fight, one punch, no signs of premeditation. It read like a form stitched to comfort. The coroner said bluntly that a blunt impact to the head had caused catastrophic injury. A straightforward story is easy for the press and for families to digest, but the more I listened, the more the edges of that neat story frayed. Bouncer statements were first, murmured into notebooks. The chief bouncer was a hulking man I'd nodded at over the years. Today his eyes were glassy when he spoke. He said he'd seen a scuffle at the end of the bar and that one man threw a punch. Then he hesitated. I don't remember clearly, he muttered, rubbing his thumb against his knuckle. That hesitation lodged in me the way a splinter does, small and aggravating. If a bouncer's memory was fuzzy, what else might be missing? We requested CCTV from the bar and several nearby stores. The bar's system, they told me, had a technical issue right when the incident occurred. The store across the street had a frame that cut in and out, static as if something had passed close to the lens. Gaps like those are not always sinister, but in the quiet that followed, they felt deliberate. A gap in footage is like a missing sentence in a confession. A witness who'd called 911 initially was later on the phone with a neighbor, and when I sought him for a statement, he hemmed and hawed, then said he didn't want to get involved. Another teenager who'd been filming on his phone the whole night suddenly claimed his battery died. People shifted from helpful to vague, with a speed that made my neck ache. The official files collected documents that said process had been followed. The unofficial stuff, the pauses, the excuses, the soft retractions, built a pattern that worried me. As an officer, I knew the logic. Preserve scene, secure witnesses, follow evidence. As a father, every delay in those steps felt like erasure. While detectives wrote lab requests and scheduled forensics, I kept turning over tiny mismatches in my head. The scatter of glass, the way a shoe tread sat askew, and felt an increasing certainty that one punch might be a story designed to stop questions. That certainty would not let me sleep. Grief arrived like a room that would not empty. For the first week, I moved through the house, expecting her footsteps, opening the fridge, the creak of her chair, but there was only the soft, terrible echo of what used to be. I kept Emily's jacket in my closet because I couldn't face putting it away. Sometimes I slipped my hand inside the sleeve and let the smell of her hair and detergent fill me for a moment, and the grief doubled down into a physical thing in my chest. We had rituals that felt sacred: burned toast on Sunday mornings, her humming while she did the dishes, the way she'd tap the counter 3 times before a new take at improv. Those small, ordinary habits were a map of our life, and losing them felt like watching a map burn. At night, I would sit under the kitchen light, that same humming bulb that had seen so many small reconciliations, and scroll through our last texts until the words blurred. The decision hardened in that light. It didn't explode out of me. It crystallized. I am a man who follows procedure for a living. I also know how slow procedure can be. Waiting felt like allowing another person's lie to settle into the world. So I made a promise, not to myself, but to Emily's memory. I would gather the pieces the system overlooked and arrange them so clearly no one could look away. This was not about revenge in the cartoon sense. It was a method. Patient, careful, almost surgical. I told myself I would use ordinary things as instruments: a phone clip, a trash receipt, a grainy frame from a camera, small, truthful objects that, when placed together, could not be dismissed. That night I closed the closet and buttoned the jacket into my car. I was not leaving to lash out. I was leaving to collect facts. The grief still lived under my ribs, but now it had a purpose. I learned early that truth often hides in the small, messy places people pretend not to see. So I started there, walking Emily's route at the hour she usually came home, like a man tracing a map he already knew by heart. I timed the lights, watched which cars idled at the corner, and noted who lingered on porches. It felt like mourning with a clipboard. Quiet, repetitive, necessary. Those walks made the neighborhood's rhythms more visible and turned ordinary movements into possible clues. I collected the tiny things everyone throws away. A paper cup by the curb had a reddish smear. I wrapped it in a napkin and tucked it in my glove compartment. A purple hair clip, sized like Emily's, was tucked in the hedgerow beside Harold's driveway. When I picked it up, the world tilted. I kept a careful log of when Harold's truck left the house, when it came back, and the exact times his porch light flicked on. I didn't post any of it. This was quiet work, the kind that doesn't look like anything until you lay the pieces out on a table. An old favor shifted things. An IT friend I'd once helped while he was young and reckless recovered fragments of a phone video that had been deleted. He called it dirty work and swore he'd never do it again. But he gave me a single grainy frame showing the rear of a truck where Emily fell. It contradicted Harold's story. 1 second, a blink, became a hinge I could put my weight on. I talked to people carefully. A bartender who'd always laughed with Harold grew silent when I mentioned Emily. A teenager who'd filmed the night claimed his battery died, then later handed me a screenshot after I left a note at his door. He'd been too scared to speak up at first. Fear buys silence until something else suggests safety. I learned to offer safety with small acts: a coffee cup, an offhand question, a brief memory of Emily that made their eyes warm with recognition. There were moral edges I didn't step over lightly. I angled a camera across the street from a porch, discreet, crude, and once I crouched under a stoop to photograph tire tread beneath Harold's truck, a neighbor's light flipped on. My heart hammered. He asked if I needed help. I lied and said I was lost. Nearly caught. Those moments were a sharp reminder. I know the law, and I know the line between investigation and intrusion, but grief had turned patience into danger, and I kept tallying consequences like a man balancing a checkbook of guilt. Unexpected help arrived when I least expected it. Harold's sister called one night, voice trembling. "He said something in the truck," she whispered. She hadn't planned to tell me. She said it because she could not hold it inside anymore. Her words, forged from fear and a sudden conscience, matched a phrase my IT friend pulled from a recovered text. The phrase tied a fragment to a face, a barback's careless mutter in an alley, a neighbor's doorbell camera showing feet, walking toward the bar minutes before the fight. Each oddity alone was flimsy. Together they made a pattern. I also found whispered confessions. A man who'd been drinking admitted to a friend he saw more than he should, and then refused to be interviewed. A woman who'd once laughed with Harold at block parties said she felt sick when she saw him afterward. These were imperfect things, half-truths, frightened admissions, but in the ledger I kept, they began to sing a single chord. I kept that ledger with careful hands, dates, times, sketches of where items sat, overheard phrases put in quotation marks. The page looked obsessive. It also looked like a map. Each thread I pulled made the fabric tighter, and the plan I was forming depended on every one of them. The work felt righteous and ugly at the same time, methodical, small, and relentless. I was assembling a case that would require patience, the slow pressure of many small truths, and the willingness to cross a private line if it meant forcing a public reckoning. I rented the community hall under a harmless name, Neighborhood Safety BBQ. It sounded like an easy thing. Hot dogs, folding chairs, a projector for a slideshow about crosswalks. That harmlessness was the point. If I'd called it a reveal or a confrontation, people would have stayed away. They came because they trusted the routine of potlucks and neighbors, because you always go to things that smell like home. I paid for the food out of my own pocket and told no one the real reason I booked the room. I recruited quietly. A reporter I'd once helped with a small tip agreed to sit at the back and keep the lights low. A retired detective I respected came without uniform. He wanted to see how the pieces fit. Most importantly, a parent who'd been at the bar that night, afraid until I offered him an anonymous place to speak, promised to bring the shaky phone video he'd hidden for weeks. I placed the evidence on a folding table up front, a tiny purple hair clip sealed in a baggie, a creased receipt, the crumpled paper cup I'd found. They looked ordinary until you knew the load they carried. When the hall filled, I started slow. I spoke about Emily like I was describing a person you needed to know. The way she chewed a pen when she was thinking, the exact smudge on her favorite scarf. People leaned in because these were details you could hold in your hand. Then I clicked the projector. A grainy frame bloomed on the screen. Night, a truck's rear pausing by the curb for a heartbeat, where the bar's neon bent light. I didn't narrate at first. I let the room breathe around that single frame. I lifted the hair clip so everyone could see the bright plastic under the light. A woman in the front row, who'd known Emily from the improv troupe, started to weep. The retired detective made a small, inaudible sound, like a man checking the lock on a door. Then the video played. A few seconds of motion, the edge of a jacket, a shadow that moved in a way that didn't fit the story we'd been told. The murmurs began soft and then rose. Harold, sitting near the back because he lived across from me, went pale and tried to smile as if politeness could armor him. He spoke first, steady at first. "I went to help," he said. "I called 911. I did what anyone would do." His voice had the flatness of rehearsed answers. I watched him for the micro movements, the way his thumb rubbed a ring, the brief blink that is a human thing when a lie feels thin. A man in the audience, one I never expected, stood up. It was the bar's former manager, a man who'd once handed Harold spare shifts. He swallowed and said, "No." He left, then came back. I thought he was looking for his keys. That crack in Harold's story widened like frost through glass. Harold's face landed in those cracks. He grabbed for a new defense. Panic, he said, that he'd been afraid of being accused. He painted himself as a man who fled, not a man who stayed. Panic is a confession in a way, an admission of failure, but it's no admission of intent. He then did something desperate. He accused me of staging the night. "You set this up," he barked, voice raw. "You planted things." The room went still like water. That accusation was a legal blade. It was also predictable. I'd expected it. If you arrange a stage, people will suspect your hands on the stage. The retired detective rose and said carefully, "If there is a claim of planting, we will examine chain of custody. Let's hear everything." The reporter, seizing the moment, asked the parent with the phone to play his clip. He did, hands shaking. The clip showed a sliver of movement, a different angle than what Harold had described. Then, in the background, a voice saying something ordinary, and then strangled, "Don't," followed by laughter that cut with anger. My stomach dropped when I recognized the cadence of a phrase Harold used when nervous, the one his sister later mentioned. Then, a twist I hadn't dared expect. Harold's own sister stood. Her knuckles were white, her voice barely a whisper. "I shouldn't be saying this," she began. But he said into his phone that night, "If she tries to get in the way, she won't make it home." I thought he meant something else. Just a heat of anger. I didn't know. The room exhaled like a living thing. For a moment, the air seemed to hold its breath. Harold tried to regain control by sobbing, by falling into the classic script of contrition. He faked a breakdown so convincing that for a second some faces softened. But then another parent, someone who'd been at the bar and kept his own footage hidden, played a second short clip. This one captured the end of an argument and a single clear word from Harold. "Move." The clarity hit like a physical blow. The hall felt smaller. People who'd once shrugged now looked at each other with the presence of witnesses. When the night ended, it wasn't with a shout or a brawl. It ended with Harold escorted out under a halo of streetlight, a police car pulling up as the whispers mounted. Some neighbors cried. Some looked away. I felt no triumph, only a deep, hollow tide that had nothing to do with victory. The trap worked the way I intended, not by tricking the law, but by removing comfort and forcing the community to choose whether to look away or to tell what they knew. I left the hall that night with the weight of what I had asked people to do: remember, speak, and face a neighbor they had once trusted. I had weaponized ordinary truth, bits of video, a hair clip, a phrase, and watched them do the work that the slow machinery of justice had not yet managed. It had the terrible precision of a surgeon's hand, and like surgery, it left scars. News vans showed up like weather, sudden and loud. Cameras rolled down our street and played the same frame of Harold's truck on repeat. The neighborhood I knew became a story with a headline, and everyone's face read differently in the light of publicity. The phone wouldn't stop. Reporters asked for timelines. Strangers sent condolences and thin accusations. The city's PR machine chewed the drama into sound bites, and the small private grief I'd been carrying turned public. Detectives reopened parts of the file. The lead prosecutor asked to see everything I'd collected. I expected them to rely on lab reports and official footage. Instead, they built a case that leaned hard on the scraps I'd assembled. The hair clip, the cup, the phone frames. My quiet work had teeth. Harold was arrested and charged after a high-drama preliminary hearing where neighbors filled the gallery and a murmured anger spread through the crowd like fire. The defense went to work fast. They attacked chain of custody, questioned how evidence was handled, and raised the possibility that someone had staged the scene. Entrapment, they said in court filings, an attempt to turn community pressure into a legal shield. That claim opened a new door, an internal review of my actions. Suddenly, the man who had gathered truth was himself under a microscope. Colleagues I'd trusted asked cautious questions. Old friends kept their distance. A city investigator requested an interview about my methods. Relief came, but it was thin. Harold's cuffs felt like an answer, yet the cost was real. Friendships broken, my reputation frayed, and an ache that no verdict could erase. The law may move, but consequences ripple farther than a single arrest. I tell this not to justify what I did, but to explain how grief can turn precise and cold. Justice and revenge wear similar faces. Both promise an end, but one leaves a community whole, and the other leaves a body of consequences. I crossed lines I once swore I would not, trading procedure for pressure, and the price was real. Friendships broken, my name questioned, a quiet that follows me into sleep. Emily's laugh still lives in the corners of this house, and every time I reach for the silver locket at my throat, I ask myself whether the trade was worth it. Would you have done the same if the person you loved disappeared in a blink? Where do we draw the line when the system moves too slowly? Share your thought below. Tell me what justice looks like to you. If this story stayed with you, subscribe for more tough, true stories and leave a comment. I set a mirror that night, not a trap to kill. I wanted him to see himself.